The first time Arak stepped onto Vornek 7, the ground shook beneath his boots. Not from fear, from hunger. This planet was not a place for soft hearts or slow reflexes. Its jungles moved. Its air howled. Even the flowers had teeth. He came alone. No armor, no translator chip. Just muscle, scars, and a scarred machete he found back on Earth. The alien outpost guards laughed when he entered. The gate zone. He didn't speak. He just walked past them into the storm. They told him the hunt would last 7 days. If he lived, he would earn their respect. If not, he would become fertilizer for the bloodgrass. He nodded once, then vanished into the jungle where the sky was orange and the trees bled black sap. She watched from the cliffs above. Her name was Shari, a warrior born of the steel moons. Her skin shimmered green under the twin suns, and her violet hair danced in the wind. When she saw the human walk unafraid, she narrowed her eyes. He had no tracker, no armor plates, no crew. The jungle should have swallowed him in hours. Yet every day, she found new signs of him. A slain razor lizard, a crushed skitter crab nest, bones carved into a crude spear. She was curious, but not impressed. On the 4th day, she dropped in front of him from a tree. She landed without a sound, blades drawn, muscles tight. He didn't flinch, just looked up at her with wild eyes and a bloody smile. That annoyed her more than she expected. "You're too soft to survive here," she mocked, circling him like a predator. "Your kind bleeds too easily. You will break. Like bone fruit under claw," she added, her voice sharp and cold. Instead of replying, he took a chunk of raw meat from his pack, bit into it, and chewed while staring at her. She blinked. No one ever ignored her challenge before. Not like that. Not with such madness in their eyes, she lunged. Not to kill, just to test him. His reflexes were slower than hers, but full of force. He caught her wrist mid-strike. Blood from the raw meat still dripped down his arm. She paused. He pushed her back without fear. The ground shook again. Not from them, from something deeper. The beast had returned. The jungle parted as a creature the size of a transport truck crawled out. Teeth like daggers. Skin like volcanic rock. Eyes that burned red. Shari stepped back instinctively. Even she, the blood-crowned warrior, feared the bone maw. It had hunted many before and torn them apart. She expected the human to run. He didn't. He dropped the meat, cracked his neck, and ran at the monster with nothing but a sharpened bone in his hand. Shari shouted for him to stop. He didn't listen. He screamed like thunder and leapt straight into the beast's mouth. She thought he died. She turned her head, closed her eyes. Then the forest echoed with a tearing sound so raw it cut the wind. When she looked again, the beast lay broken. The human stood on its back, his face covered in blood. Shari stared in silence. She had hunted that monster for 6 years. Failed every time. This man tore it apart with nothing but rage and bones. And then he looked at her, not for praise, but as if daring her to say something again. She couldn't. Shari did not speak for a long time. She stood with her arms crossed and watched the human wipe blood off his chest. He looked like a beast himself. His skin was scratched, bruised, but his eyes were steady. He didn't ask for help. He didn't look at the corpse of the bone maw like it was a victory. He looked at it like it was breakfast. She walked slowly toward the dead creature. Her boots crunched over the broken bones and thick hide. She touched one of the beast's fangs, still warm. "How did you kill it?" she asked. The human didn't respond. He was already tearing off a chunk of flesh with his bare hands. He offered her some, but she shook her head with a grimace. The silence between them grew heavier. The jungle around them seemed to respect the scene. Even the insects were quiet. Shari watched as he wrapped the beast's sinew around his arm like a trophy. She expected arrogance, but there was only focus in his movements. He was not trying to impress her. He was preparing for something else. "You're not like the others," she said at last. They came with drones and energy shields. You came with bones and fury. I mocked you because I thought you were weak. But you're worse. You're dangerous. The human finally looked at her and smirked. That made her pulse quicken for reasons she did not like. He didn't say much. Only one word. More? She didn't understand at first, but then she realized what he meant. He wanted another challenge, another monster, another fight. She stared at him like he was insane. But deep down, something inside her wanted to see what he would do next. She nodded once and turned her back. Follow me. Her voice was cold, but her thoughts were burning. No human had ever lasted this long on Vornak 7 without backup. And none had ever killed a bone maw alone. If he kept going like this, he might become more feared than the beasts themselves. They moved through the trees like shadows. He made no noise. No complaints, no fear. His bare feet stepped on sharp rocks, venom roots, and bones. He did not stop. She glanced back at him several times, expecting to see pain or hesitation. But all she saw was purpose. At dusk, they reached the ridge of the Koran Sink. A deep canyon filled with creatures older than memory. No warrior went down there alone. Even the bravest waited for squads and air support. But when Shari stopped at the edge, the human walked past her and stared down into the glowing blue. Missed without blinking. There, she said, pointing to the moving shadows below. 3 gloom serpents. One mistake and your bones will decorate the cliffs. He didn't flinch. Instead, he tied the beast's sinew tighter around his wrist and adjusted his grip on the bone blade. Then he jumped. Shari cursed it under her breath. She leaped after him without thinking. The air rushed past them as they fell, the jungle blur turning into a storm of motion. She landed beside him just in time to see the first serpent rise. Its skin shimmered like oil. Its eyes were pure light. Its mouth was already open. The human didn't slow down. He sprinted toward it like a wild animal. She expected him to dodge, but instead he slid under its jaw and stabbed upward. The blade pierced flesh. Blood sprayed the rocks. The serpent screeched, flailed, and slammed him against a boulder. He coughed but kept fighting. Shari joined the battle. Her twin blades flashed in the dim light. Together, they tore through the serpent's defenses. It took both of them to bring it down. The other 2 serpents hissed and coiled in the mist. But Shari glanced at the human and saw something she never saw before: joy. He was smiling through blood. Breathing hard but laughing like a man who found something he had been searching for. She felt a chill in her chest. Not from fear, but from the strange thought growing in her mind. This man was not surviving the jungle. He was becoming part of it. She didn't say it out loud. But in her heart, she whispered it to herself. This human is a monster. The canyon was quiet after the battle. The bodies of the gloom serpents lay still across the rocks. Blue blood shimmered under the fading light. Shari leaned against a stone wall, catching her breath. Her armor was scratched. Her hands were sore, but her eyes never left the human. He sat near one of the corpses, running his fingers through the strange blood. He studied it like a curious child. Then he wiped it across his chest like war paint. Shari had seen many warriors, but never one who treated death with such calm. He didn't see it as horror. He saw it as purpose. She approached slowly. You should have died, she said. He didn't answer. You took a hit that would break a Vornak spine. And still, you stand like nothing happened. He tilted his head, listening. Then he smiled and stood up. That smile made her uneasy again. Pain reminds me I'm alive, he said simply. His voice was dry, rough, but steady. He looked down at the gloom serpent and kicked its head aside. And I like feeling alive. She couldn't tell if it was bravery or madness. Either way, it was working. They climbed out of the canyon together. It was steep and rough. He used his hands, feet, even his teeth at one point to grip a root. She offered help once. He refused without a word. By the time they reached the ridge, his knuckles were bleeding. But he kept walking. Shari led him to the upper plains where no outsider had ever stepped. The air shimmered with heat. Lightning pulsed far above in the clouds. Strange beasts moved below the ground like shadows swimming under glass. It was the most dangerous part of Vornak 7. She brought him here to test the limit of his will. Sky beast circled overhead. It moved silently with wings longer than a shuttle. Its eyes burned gold. It senses blood, Shari warned. It will strike if you show weakness. He didn't even look up. He dropped to one knee and rubbed dirt across his wounds. Then, "I won't be weak," he said. The beast dived fast. She stepped back, ready to dodge, but the human didn't move. Instead, he roared at the sky and hurled a stone straight into the creature's eye. It screeched and spun away into the clouds. Shari stared at him. Her breath caught in her throat. He was laughing again. No other human had ever reached this deep. The jungle, the beasts, the storms, none had broken him. She was beginning to understand something terrifying. He was not here to survive. He was here to conquer. And now she was the one following him. He stopped near a pool of black water. Steam rose from it, and glowing plants swayed at its edges. Shari warned him it was toxic, but he knelt anyway. "Your planet is honest," he said. "It tries to kill me without lies. Earth kills you slowly with comfort." That was the first time he mentioned his home. She sat beside him. Not close, but close enough to feel his heat. "You hate your world that much?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up a glowing root and bit it. His face twisted. It burned. But he chewed it anyway. Swallowed it. Then he nodded. "Earth made me forget how to fight," he said. "Here, I remember." That sentence made her chest tighten. She didn't know if it was fear or something else. He looked like a man who found a place that fit him better than the one he was born in. Shari stood up and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, the ash fields burned. That was their next trial. Few survived it. The storms there melted. Armor, the creatures were faster than thought. But when she turned to ask him if he was ready, he was already walking toward it. He didn't wait for her. He didn't need to. And somehow, she followed. The ash fields were like walking into a furnace. Heat came from the ground, the air, and even the wind. Black dust clung to everything. It burned skin. It filled lungs. It swallowed light. Shari wrapped a cloth around her face and eyes. The human didn't. He walked with his chest bare and head high. The dust painted his body like war ink. His steps were heavy but steady. His eyes didn't blink as sparks floated past. Every few minutes, fire would rise from the earth like angry breath. He didn't flinch. He kept going. Shari stayed behind him now. She had led him before, but something had shifted. He didn't speak or command, but her feet moved after his. She told herself it was for safety, that she could watch his back better. But deep inside, she knew she followed because she wanted to see what he would do next. A storm began to rise from the edge of the plain. Lightning cracked across the sky. The winds screamed like wild animals. Shari shouted a warning, but he didn't slow down. He just turned his head slightly and nodded. Then he pressed forward into the heart of it. They found shelter under the ruins of a crashed warpod. Metal beams jutted out like broken bones. Shari slid in first, crouching low. The human ducked in behind her and sat down with a sigh. The storm howled outside, but he was calm, almost peaceful. Like he enjoyed the chaos. "What are you really looking for?" she asked, breaking the silence. He didn't respond right away. He pulled a shard of black metal from the floor and turned it in his hands. "Something worth bleeding for," he finally said. "Something real, something that doesn't lie or pretend." His voice was quiet, but every word struck hard. Shari frowned. So you think this planet is honest? He nodded. It doesn't hide its hunger. It doesn't pretend to be safe. Here, if you survive, you earn it. Back home, you rot while smiling. She didn't understand it fully, but the fire in his voice made her listen. When the storm passed, they moved again. The air was still thick with heat, but clearer now. In the distance, towers of bone and crystal rose from the ground. Shari's eyes narrowed. The grave spires, she said. No one enters that place. It is cursed. He didn't stop walking. Perfect, he muttered. They reached the spires by dusk. Each one stood taller than a ship. Bones were carved with symbols older than memory. Crystals hummed softly in the wind. The place felt cold, even though the heat still boiled around them. Shari placed her hand on a skull and whispered an old word of respect. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked. A low rumble echoed through the stone. From the shadows between the spires, figures began to rise. They were not beasts, not machines. They were the remains of old warriors, awakened by trespassers. Their bones were fused with metal. Their eyes burned white. Shari drew her blades. Back away, slowly, she whispered. But the human didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward. They remember, he said softly. They know strength. One of the undead charged. Fast, Shari jumped back, ready to fight. But the human didn't dodge. He tackled the creature head-on. Bone shattered, metal snapped. The human roared and slammed the creature into the stone wall. Another came, then another. He grabbed a broken piece of rib and drove it through a skull. Bloodless bodies fell at his feet. Shari joined him, spinning and slicing. But her eyes kept flicking to him between every move. He fought like he had something to prove. Not to her, not to the dead, to himself. He didn't stop. Even after they fell, he kept striking until dust rose in thick clouds. Shari touched his shoulder to calm him. He froze, breathing hard. Then slowly lowered his hand. They stood in the center of the ruins. Dozens of broken bodies around them. Shari's hands shook, not from fear, but from something deeper. Something unknown. The human turned and walked to the center of the spires. There, on a pedestal of black stone, was an ancient weapon. He looked at her and raised an eyebrow. She nodded slowly. He took it. The weapon was unlike anything he had seen before. It was forged from obsidian bone, and glowing red veins pulsed through it like blood. The hilt was carved with symbols that vibrated softly when touched. As soon as his fingers closed around it, the air shifted. Shari stepped back and placed a hand on her chest. Her heart raced without reason. The weapon responded to the human's touch, not with resistance, but with acceptance. It had rejected thousands before. Warriors, champions, even her own commander. But it pulsed calmly in his grip. He raised it and swung once. The wind hissed. A nearby stone cracked in half without being touched. Shari's mouth opened, but no words came out. This wasn't a tool, it was alive. And somehow it had chosen him without question. She stared as if seeing him for the first time. Does it speak to you? She asked. He shook his head. No, he said. It just feels like it belongs. His voice didn't carry pride or surprise. It was a statement of fact. She watched him strap it across his back and turn toward the east. There was no ceremony, no ritual, just motion. They left the spires before nightfall. The jungle welcomed them like it had changed. Birds flew in silence. Beasts moved away instead of toward them. Shari had walked these paths her whole life. But now the air bent differently. Like the planet itself was paying attention. She tried to speak, but no words felt right. The silence between them stretched long. Still, it was not cold. Not awkward. She walked beside him, blades sheathed, eyes alert. The sky turned violet. Stars peeked through thick clouds. A low vibration hummed beneath the ground, as if the planet waited for something. He stopped at a dry riverbed. The bones of fallen beasts littered the ground. Large claw marks were etched into the canyon walls. "We're close," he muttered. Shari narrowed her eyes. To what? He crouched and ran a finger through the dirt. Then he pointed to a set of tracks leading into the mist. "Something big lives here," he said. Something old. She recognized the pattern too. The marks belonged to a night howler, a beast that lived in shadow and fed on energy. It had wiped out 3 of her scouting teams in the past. Not even fire worked against it. She gritted her teeth. "You want to fight that thing?" she asked. He looked at her with a quiet fire in his eyes. "I don't wanna. I have to." He stood up and followed the trail. She hesitated, then followed. Her hands stayed near her blades. But deep down, she knew they might not be enough this time. The cave was shaped like a wound in the land. Black vines curled along the entrance. A heavy pulse echoed from within. They entered without speaking. Darkness swallowed them instantly. The glowing lines on the weapon's surface lit their way. It reacted to the cave as if it knew the path. Inside, the walls were smooth and wet. Strange symbols pulsed along the stone. A deep breathing sound came from further in. Shari gripped her blade tightly. The human kept walking until they reached the main chamber. Then the shadows moved. The night howler rose slowly. Its body was massive, covered in black fur and jagged bone. Its face had no eyes, only a wide mouth filled with curved teeth. Shari stepped back. Her instinct screamed. But the human stepped forward and drew the ancient weapon. The beast lunged first. Fast and silent, the human dodged low and slashed upward. The blade left a red trail through the air. It struck the creature's chest, sparks flew, but no blood spilled. The howler spun and threw him against the wall. He hit hard but stood back up without hesitation. Shari joined the fight. Her blades danced like silver lightning, but they barely scratched its hide. The howler knocked her away with one swing. Pain shot through her ribs. She fell but didn't scream. The human leapt over her, roaring, and drove the ancient weapon into the beast's back. A shockwave exploded through the cave. The weapon pulsed like a heart. The beast howled. Not in pain but confusion. Shari watched as its body began to crack. Light poured from the wounds. The weapon had awakened something inside the creature. It was not just killing it. It was undoing. The howler fell to its knees. Its mouth opened in silence. Then its body broke into ashen light. The dust floated upward and vanished into the cave ceiling. Silence returned. The only sound was the human's breath and the fading hum of the weapon in his hand. Shari stood slowly and looked at him. "You're changing," she whispered. He didn't deny it. The air inside the cave turned still as the last of the glowing ash disappeared into the darkness above. Shari didn't move. Her fingers were trembling, but not from fear. She stared at the human standing in the middle of the broken chamber. His chest was heaving, but his eyes were calm. The weapon in his hand dimmed slowly, its veins pulsing faintly like a dying star. He didn't loosen his grip. Instead, he walked to the place where the beast had fallen and knelt. He reached out and touched the ground where only a burn mark remained. Then he closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Shari stepped forward carefully. That thing was worshipped by the bone tribes. They believed it was a god, she said. You just erased it. He didn't react the way she expected. No smile, no pride. Only a quiet nod as he stood up again. Then their god was weak. He replied. His words weren't cruel. They were honest. Cold and sharp like the wind outside the ash fields. Shari looked away for a moment, unsure of what to feel. She had trained for years to face threats like that and failed. He arrived with nothing but will and an ancient blade and succeeded. They walked out of the cave side by side. The night had fallen hard across the jungle. Strange blue lights floated among the trees like spirits watching from a distance. The wind carried no danger now. The beasts knew what had happened. The forest remembered its balance had changed. They reached a cliff that overlooked the lowlands. Fires burned across the horizon. In the distance, war horns echoed. The land was shifting, factions rising, creatures stirring. Shari pointed to the east. "They will come for you now," she said. "The tribes, the warlords, the false kings. They will see you as a threat." He looked out into the burning distance. His expression didn't change. "Let them come," he said. "I didn't come here to hide." He turned to her then. "I came to burn everything weak away. Inside me, around me, all of it." His voice didn't rise. It was calm, steady, terrifying. Shari nodded. There was no stopping him now, not with strength, not with reason. Something in him had broken open and could no longer be sealed. She knew it, and strangely she didn't want to stop him. She wanted to see what would happen next. They made camp by the cliff's edge. No fire, just silence and the soft pulse of energy from the ancient weapon resting near the rocks. He sat cross-legged, sharpening bone blades with his bare hands. She sat nearby, arms folded, watching the stars shift above. The stars on Vornek 7 moved. Differently than on Earth. Slower, brighter, more alive. She wondered if he saw them the same way, or if he even looked. His mind was somewhere else, maybe still inside the cave. Maybe ahead in the blood-soaked fields he would walk tomorrow. "You said you wanted something real," she whispered. "Is this it?" He paused his motion. The bones in his grip stilled. He looked up at her, and for a moment, something gentle flickered behind the steel in his eyes. "Almost," he said. "But I'm not done yet." She didn't press further. He wasn't a man to explain himself. And she wasn't a woman who begged for reasons. Still, a part of her wanted to understand him fully. The part that had watched him bleed, break monsters, and walk through fire without hesitation. Before sleep took them, he stood and walked to the edge. He raised the weapon and pointed it at the horizon. The symbols along its spine lit up once. Again, the jungle went quiet. Even the wind stopped moving. Something was responding. Something old and massive beneath the world. Shari stood too. Her hand rested on the hilt of her blade, but she didn't draw it. Her voice was soft. "What are you doing?" He didn't turn around. "Calling out," he said. "If this world has one final beast, I want it to hear me." Then he lowered the weapon and looked up at the stars again. Shari didn't speak. She just watched him and understood. The jungle didn't sleep that night. Trees bent as if listening. Vines curled tighter. Small creatures crawled underground. A sound moved across the land, not from one beast, not from many. From something deep and ancient. The world itself had heard his challenge. Shari stood alone at the edge of the cliff while the human slept with one hand on the weapon. She stared into the darkness and felt the wind change direction. It carried dust, fire, and something worse. It carried memory of wars, of deaths, of beasts that had no name. When morning broke, the sky bled orange and gold. He opened his eyes. Before the first bird cried, he sat up, stretched his arms, and looked out into the horizon as if expecting someone. She approached him with quiet steps, but he spoke first. "It's coming," he said. "What is?" she asked. He pointed east. A long line of black moved across the land. It was not smoke, it was not soldiers, it was something else. "Something old, the pale devourer," he said. "I saw it in the vision last night." She stared harder and felt her knees weaken. The pale devourer was a myth to her people. A story whispered to keep young warriors humble. A creature made of bone, stone, and shadow. It ate everything in its path. Forests, oceans, cities. It was not a beast. It was a force. And now it was real. He stood and picked up the weapon. Its red glow was stronger now. The symbols on its surface pulsed with energy that hummed in the air. "This is why I came here," he said. "Not to fight the weak. Not to prove anything. But to face that." Shari grabbed his arm. "If you go alone, you will die," she said. He looked at her not with pride, but understanding. "Then die." "With me," he replied. Her hand trembled but didn't let go. Her people would never forgive her for helping a human. But her heart already had. They ran toward the storm. The jungle tried to stop them. Trees fell in their path. Beasts screamed and fled. Ash fell like rain, but they didn't stop. Step by step, the heat around them grew stronger. The sky darkened as if the sun itself was afraid to watch. By midday, they reached the edge of a ruined battlefield. The land was cracked. Skeletons lay half buried in the dirt. Machines melted into stone. In the center, a crater smoked. The pale devourer waited there, its body coiled around dead mountains. It had no eyes, only 1,000 mouths. He raised the weapon and stepped forward. The earth trembled. The devourer shifted, its body unfolding like a rising wave. Its mouths opened one by one, releasing a sound that shook the bones of the dead. Shari covered her ears. The human kept walking. Lightning fell from the sky. Not random, not natural. It struck the weapon in his hand. The glow turned white. The wind lifted his hair. He looked back at Shari and gave a single nod. She drew her blades. Her knees shook, but she stepped beside him without hesitation. They charged as one. The beast roared. The ground cracked open. Shadows rose like smoke, but their steps never slowed. He leapt into the air and brought the weapon down on the creature's head. It shrieked, and the sound knocked trees flat across the plain. Shari followed, slicing at the mouths that came too close. The battle was chaos. Light and fire danced across the field. The devourer crushed boulders with a twitch. It swallowed fire and spat black acid. But they fought together, not as two warriors, but as one fury. The weapon screamed with energy every time it struck. Blood poured from his arm, but he didn't stop. Her blades snapped, but she fought with the jagged peace. The world around them was ending, but neither gave in. In the heart of death, they found life. In the jaws of doom, they found purpose. In each other's shadow, they found strength. Then the weapon broke through the beast's core. A blast of white light exploded. The beast screamed one final time. Its body unraveled like cloth in fire. Dust spread into the sky. Silence fell again. They stood in the crater as ash rained down. He dropped to one knee. Shari caught him before he fell. The crater was still burning when the skies cleared. Sunlight pierced through the ash-filled clouds, casting pale golden light over the battlefield. The pale devourer was gone. Its body had turned to dust. Its shadow had vanished. But the human had fallen. Shari knelt beside him and placed 2 fingers on his neck. The pulse was weak but steady. Blood coated his chest and arms. His breaths were short, sharp, but alive. She had seen many warriors fall in her life, but none had fought like him. None had stood until the world itself broke. Slowly, he opened his eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just looked at her as if checking she was still there. She nodded and rested a hand on his shoulder. He tried to stand, failed, then laughed once and sat back down. That laugh said more than words ever could. "You lived," she whispered. He nodded. "So did you," he replied. Together, they sat in silence as the wind carried the last of the ash away. The jungle beyond the crater was quiet. Even the sky beasts did not return. Everything on this planet had felt the moment the pale devourer died. Shari stood first. She offered her hand. He took it, and she pulled him to his feet. He staggered but stayed upright. The weapon he carried was cracked, no longer glowing, but it hadn't shattered completely. It had done what it was meant to do. Just like its bearer. They left the crater and walked slowly toward the highlands. No more beasts came. No roots grabbed at their feet. The ground was still. The planet was healing. Even the cursed vines bloomed for the first time in years. Life was returning. Because the greatest death had passed, news spread faster than flame. Tribes from the east and warlords from the burning valleys came to the high cliffs. They did not come to challenge. They came to kneel. They came to witness the man who had ended the pale devourer. Some brought gifts. Others offered oaths. None dared raise a weapon. Shari watched from the shadows as the human stood before them. He didn't speak much. He simply stood, scars open. To the wind, eyes like stormfire. And in silence, the world watched. Some said he was cursed. Some said he was chosen. All agreed he was no longer just a man. He did not claim a throne. He did not demand a crown. He rejected the war banners and refused the stone seat offered by the elders. I did not come here to rule, he said. I came here to survive, and now I will live. His voice was dry but final. Shari met him again beneath the starlight. Days later, they sat on a cliff above the valley where beasts once roamed. What now? She asked. He thought for a moment, then looked up. Now I find peace, he said, if this world allows it. She nodded slowly. Her heart felt full. The fire in him had not died. But it had changed. It no longer burned to destroy. It burned to protect, to endure, to rise without rage. The beast inside him had quieted. The weapon remained at his side, but no longer pulsed with hunger. It rested just as he now did. He stayed in the wild lands, beyond cities and walls. People came to him for stories, for trials, for wisdom. He gave them only truth. Fight only when you must, he said. Bleed only for what matters. His words were simple. But they became legend. They became law. Shari stood by his side. Through the seasons, she watched the world reshape itself around his silence. She saw warriors become gardeners. She saw killers become poets. All because one man had dared to tear apart a god and keep walking. He never returned to Earth. He never wanted to, because Vornak 7 became his home.